First of all, let me just say the person of the year, the newsmaker of the year, it's not a prize the way the public often perceives it. I remember how much heat Time magazine took for making Ayatollah Khomeini the person of the year in 1979. So if potentially problematic figures are in play, then obviously the obvious choice would be Donald Trump. But I chose not to be obvious. And to take a step further back, I think my newsmaker is the man without whom quite possibly Trump would not have been elected. A man who became the wealthiest person in the world in the course of 2024 and who's currently on track to become the first trillionaire, and as such will be the wealthiest person by purchasing power to ever have walked the earth. But moreover, when Elon Musk, who's my person of the year, bought Twitter, that was seen as sort of a vanity and maybe a bad business decision. But he's turned it into a massive political juggernaut for himself and for influence for the two things that he seems to care about, which are the two trends I mentioned before, illiberalism and anti-wokeism. And as such, he has used his status as the person with the biggest following on Twitter, over 200 million users, Twitter having been renamed X.com, to really shake up not just American but global politics. Now he's really attuned to the global zeitgeist. I mean, good Lord, he is able to say the most absurd things on Twitter and get away with it, and that's a version of genius. He said civil war in the UK is inevitable. He supported the AfD fascist party in Germany, and no one seemed to care. He called some person a pedo, and again, no damage comes to him. He's a person who declared that his transgender daughter, formerly son, is dead to him, and is a victim, is dead, and is a victim of the woke mind virus. This, whether or not we like it, is reflective of something major happening in the world. The world's richest man is truly impactful, even though he's also a hypocrite and a bit of a vulgarian and someone who's very dangerous.
Very briefly, how worried are you? There are many voicing concern about the kind of influence he may wield over Donald Trump and his inner circle. Briefly.
Of course. He donated so much money to Trump that he has a lot of power, and Trump has already declared that he will co-run from outside government, the Department of Government Efficiency, which will aim to shave $2 trillion, meaning a third, off the federal budget. Now think about this. Think about the incredibly bad karma that attaches to the fact that the world's richest man is going to put perhaps 1 million middle-income people, federal workers, out of a job, and is going to crush the entitlements of tens of millions of lower-income people. Now that is the world we currently live in. And therefore, when I name him my person of the year, it is with little joy, but with a recognition that we're talking about a very impactful character.
Impactful indeed, an interesting choice. Ariel Oseran, our Middle East correspondent, you've been covering this war throughout, looking back at the last year, your newsmaker.
Yeah, kind of down to the wire with my selection, who up until 5 weeks ago was pretty much, no one knew who he was. I'm talking about, obviously, Abu Muhammad al-Julani, Ahmed al-Sharaa, the de facto leader of Syria, who led the swift toppling of the Assad regime. Over 50 years in power, took 11 days to completely oust the Bashar al-Assad regime, government, and military family, you name it. Ahmed al-Sharaa, or formerly known as Abu Muhammad al-Julani, he comes from a history. He led the al-Qaeda faction of Syria, Jabhat al-Nusra, then disconnected from them, got into a feud with ISIS. Now he is on course to become the most sought-after leader in the Middle East. If until 5 weeks ago Syria was a pariah in the Middle East, now it is the most sought-after nation. And he has an uphill battle, but as far as, if we look at his statements and his actions since he took this de facto leadership position, he is making all the right decisions, all the right statements. He even transitioned from the Islamist uniform to a politician suit, even trimmed the beard a little bit. And there are still a lot of concerns moving forward regarding Syria. His interim government is full of his Hayat Tahrir Hashem inner circle. Until March, they're supposed to be in power. Then a transitional government for 3 to 4 years. That will be a big test to see if indeed, not necessarily abandoning the Islamist nature, but what transformation he has assumed now. I just want to give one example to optimistic shift that he has made. Yesterday was announced that the new head of the Bank of Syria is going to be a woman. Today, Mohsena El-Maithawi was appointed as the new Syrian government, by the new Syrian government, as the governor of the majority Druze Aswaida province. El-Maithawi is going to be the first ever woman to be a governor of a province in Syria. And so if we're, again, looking not only at statements, but in actions, one cannot take this as a positive, optimistic sign moving forward.
Your thoughts briefly.
Well, on that, I agree. The signs are, in fact, quite good. But if he's our newsmaker of the year, then honorable mention has to go to Recep Tayyip Erdogan in Turkey and to Benjamin Netanyahu in Israel, without whose help I doubt any of this would have happened.
Indeed.
Certainly fascinating, and the jury obviously still out on exactly what this transformation is going to involve, and obviously major decisions across the region. The Middle East is watching. Now, for my choice, it's a very tough one to choose after a year like this, but in my heart, the newsmakers of the year would be the hostages, those still in Hamas captivity in tunnels of Gaza, and those at home rescued or released who are living with the trauma they endured at the hands of pure evil. Now, at the start of this year, the first truce hostage deal was over and the next deal seemed imminent, and yet here we are a full year later, and we don't even know for sure how many of the hostages are alive. To think that after the brutality and depravity of the 7th of October and the details we have learned about what is happening in captivity, that hostages young and old are still there. The deafening silence in some parts of the international arena, it's disturbing. The pain and uncertainty for their families, unimaginable. The hostages, newsmakers of the year for 2024, may they all come home, and may they all come home soon. Heartbreaking indeed, devastating to think of those still in Gaza right now. But the extra layer, Dan, is the fact that there is this deafening silence, and has been throughout the past year. What do you make of it? What are your insights?
Look, it has to be said. There's a mantra in Israel that everyone wants the hostages returned, sure, and everyone wants world peace, but not everyone in Israel is willing to pay the price for that return. That includes the government. The truth is that the government has consciously sacrificed many of these hostages. Hamas has been very consistent since the beginning of the war in saying that they will return the hostages in exchange for an Israeli pullout and the return of prisoners held by Israel. Now, in the beginning, for example, I would have opposed that. But since the middle of 2024, the military has been saying that Hamas's ability to threaten Israel militarily has been destroyed. And very clearly, the security establishment in Israel has favored essentially accepting Hamas's deal and ending the war in exchange for a return of the hostages. Since that has been the case, since May or June, roughly, dozens of them have died in captivity. And this is a result of Israel's choice. Now, you can say, as many Israelis do, that the government is trying to drag its feet because of political reasons, because when the war ends, quite probably the government collapses. Or you could argue that this is an almost courageous, principled decision, because to accept these terms would not only leave Hamas in power, but would involve the release of so many terrorists that would be the greater disadvantage to Israel. Either way, this is a choice that Israel has made.
So looking into that crystal ball we alluded to earlier, how do you see this all unfolding in the year to come?
Well, I would say this. Trump, remarkably, for a person this boorish and basically ignorant, he thinks China is paying for the tariffs, is in a position to do great good in the Middle East. The Trump effect that Ariel spoke of is already in play, and it's quite possible quite possible that Trump's determination, his almost simple-minded worldview to sweep aside complexities and nuance, could lead in 2025 to the end of the wars, not only in the Middle East, but also in Ukraine. And in the context of that, it could involve, indeed, a return of the hostages, perhaps rather soon.
30 seconds, your predictions for the year ahead. What stands out?
Again, the hostages, the key topic for all Israelis moving forward. I heard personally in my own ears from someone deep in the negotiations that at the end of the day, a deal or no deal depends on one person, and that is Benjamin Netanyahu. And if this Trump effect could sway him in the direction of making this political decision, that is very key, but one cannot try to anticipate what decisions one person makes in his own mind.
Hamas also needs to make some decisions. Dan, very briefly.
Well, but Hamas has put forth their excruciatingly high price for a deal. If that's the case, if Ariel's right, and I think he is, then it's another reason to be optimistic, because essentially the whole edifice for Israel exiting the war has been on the table for months now. Biden wanted it and proposed it, and Bibi swept it aside. Trump will take credit, but he'll try to impose the same thing on Netanyahu. Netanyahu will have difficulty ignoring Trump.